Hey, you guys, it is Tuesday. It is 12 o'clock Central Time. It is time for another episode of Anything But Average, Achieving Success in Life. And normally, when I created this originally, it was to gain insight into people's success stories and what helped them grow their business or what is helping them and share their struggles and stuff. But my gosh, ever since this freaking coronavirus, that we got all kinds of weird stuff happening in 2020, and I'm not quite sure what's going on this year, but there's a lot of stuff. And so today we're going to take a little bit of a different turn. It's still achieving success in life, but I got my good friend Sekou with me today, and he is coming to us from New York. And first of all, thank you for doing this with me, Sekou.
My pleasure, sis. It is absolutely my pleasure. I'm sorry that we talk about circumstances that are this deep, but I guess if we started the year with murder hornets, it could only go down from there, right?
I'm guessing so, right? Now, here's the funny thing. Like, we didn't even have this planned that we were going to do the interview today. Like, I usually schedule stuff out a month in advance, but here's the real truth to why we're doing this today. It's because I go to Lakewood Church. Lakewood Church is being viewed online right now. And for just a little backstory there, Joel Osteen's the head pastor there, who's a white guy. John Gray is a black man and a black pastor, and one of my all-time favorite pastors ever. And so I first started listening to John Gray probably maybe 4 years ago. And then at Lakewood, they invited him to be part of their leadership team. You know, they brought him on as one of the pastors there, which was like, we loved it. And so when they did their service Sunday morning, it was Joel having a conversation with John Gray, like you and I are doing right now. And Joel sat there, they were sitting side by side in a chair. And Joel said, you know, I never thought of anything different as you being black and me being white. He said, when we invited you on part of our leadership team here, it wasn't because we wanted a black pastor. It's because you're a phenomenal pastor and we would be blessed to have you. And when he said that, I was like, you were the first person that came to my mind. You were already heavy on my mind. But I was like, man, when you and I met on that Live with Leaders set, like that was our first introduction to each other, and I just had this instant connection. Not because it's like I see you as this black man. It's like you're an amazing soul.
We bring the energy.
Human and my friend, you know.
Yes, ma'am. We bring the energy. I talk about you often, man. I say that people only have the opportunity to meet great examples once or twice. Right. And I've had the great fortune of constantly being in front of great examples. I talk about you, and I talk about your faith, and I talk about your commitment. And most of all, I talk about your grit, your willingness to just put your hands in the mud and get your hands dirty with everyone else. You know, there's this there's an impression of what's going on around the world, and most of it is based on perception. Most of it is based on how people appear to feel, right? Most of it is based on how people are reacting to stuff. And I spend more of my time dealing with folks with their hand in the mud and grabbing the hammer and hammering nails in and just doing the work in order to raise the house, instead of pointing at folks who are working and saying you should work a different way or something like that, you know. So I speak about you quite often. You've become a fast friend and a great example of people that I work with.
You know, and one thing that I listened to all of Joel's message, and I was sitting there, and John Gray used an example. He's a big black man, and he's like, in Houston, he's been very blessed. Of course, God has had favor on him, and that's a great thing. And so he had pulled up to his house one night, and he was sitting in his car. It was dark. He was just reflecting on things. He wasn't doing anything wrong, but he said a police officer pulled up. He was in his own driveway in his car, and he immediately felt fear, like, I'm going to get harassed. And so he called his wife, And he said, I need you to come to the front door. And she said, what are you doing? She thought he was joking around. He's like, I'm not kidding. Come to the front door now. And as soon as he said, come to the front door now, the police officer was by his door and was like, is there something I can help you with? And John's like,
Yep.
yeah, I'm about to go into my house. I live here. And his wife opened the front door, and the police officer said, ma'am, is everything okay? And she's like, of course it's okay. That is my husband.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was listening to that story like, that's just wrong, you know? But it isn't a matter of, I don't believe it's a matter of white versus black. I think it's a matter of good versus evil, because in white people, there's freaking trash, and there's evil, and in black people, and in Mexicans, and Chinese, and and green and blue, and whatever the hell you want to be. But there's evil in all the world out there, and everyone tries to make it be about race. But why don't we like talk about what it is? It's good versus evil, you know? And I think too many people want to chalk it up to pull out the race card, and it's like, let's not talk about race. Let's talk about being kind and being a human, you know? And I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that.
Let's say it like this. I don't even necessarily think, not that it's not good versus evil, but I don't think that the cop that's pulling folks over, or the average cop is just going on instinct and feeling and what have you. And there's a lot to be said about perception. So the perception is written that these guys over here are more violent. These guys over here are prone to attack. These guys over here are always up to no good. The images are constantly replayed over and over and over and over and over again. If you take that and your job relies on your instinct and your perception in order to get the job done, right? If I'm in my house and somebody's lurking around in my yard, I want the cop to stop them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If I'm in my yard, right? If I'm in my yard, for whatever reason, I don't want anybody to mess with me. Mm-mm. Right. And so there's a problem with perception right now. Right. So I'm not one of these guys that's like, you know, oh, well, this has to be 100% this way and this has to be 100% that way. What I do want is accountability. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that white, black, whatever, Mexican, Chinese, whatever, I think, what's up, Mitch? I think that if there's some accountability after the action, right? If there's a mistake that's made, if there's a perception issue, if the guy is racist, if the guy is a bigot, whatever it is, if there's some accountability afterwards, then what happens is that the playing field gets leveled, right? And I think most of the reaction that we're seeing out there in the world is just, there is an incredible lack of accountability.
Total.
An incredible, I watched them do things to people all the time. People, personally, I'm not even talking about videos. I'm talking about personal life. I've watched them violate rights constantly. And then they just leave like, yeah, it's not a big deal, right? I lived through the Central Park 5. I was a young man in Harlem after the Central Park 5. When we used to call it the Central Park Jogger incident, right? Before it was the Central Park 5.
About what that is.
So back in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a case where there was this young white woman on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, right? So Central Park is just that. It is in the center of Manhattan, and it takes up between 59th Street and 110th Street, and between 5th Avenue and what could be considered 8th Avenue in New York. So it's a big, huge chunk of the center of Manhattan.
Okay.
And she lived around, I want to say 108th Street, 109th Street, and would go running in the park. This young white woman, executive, someone jumped her, hit her in the head with a brick, and raped her, brutally raped her. I mean, it was incredibly brutal. Same time of night, around that time of year, it's getting close to springtime. You know, everyone is out. On the other side of the park, on 110th Street, 116th Street, there's a building called the Schomburg. And being cooped up all week or all winter, you know, young people come out and they play. So they usually not play, but, you know, hang out, you know, teenagers.
Get out,
right? So they're in the park on the east side of town. She's on the west side. They're on the east side. The police come, and because of what was happening on the on the west side of town, they just start rounding up kids, right? And these 5 kids get accused, and like, there's a lot of injustice that happened around their interviews with the police. There's a lot of brutality. There's a lot of this and that. And they wind up going to jail for dozens of years, like 15, 20, 30 years, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, no, it was a long time. Come to find out, they didn't abuse this, or they didn't even come in contact with this woman at all. It was another person altogether. It was one person, not 5 people.
Wow.
They exonerated them, DNA exonerated them, et cetera, et cetera. The person confessed. They let these kids out. However, that summer, right? So you got to figure it's the end of the school year, throughout the entire summer. To be young, Black, and male in New York and Manhattan at that time was to be a crime.
I bet.
And they would walk up on us, and it was like a drama almost. They would walk up on us and they'd be like, "You know what this is? Turn around." If it was Wednesday or Thursday and they felt like it, we'd be in the tombs, in the holding cells, not in jail, not in this, but just in the tombs until Monday or Tuesday.
Wow.
Until they eventually did the paperwork and we would get out, and it would become a routine.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that for that to be a routine, you had to violate our rights each and every time.
100%.
Each and every time. So we got to know the cops that was doing it. We could call them by name. We knew their badge numbers by heart. We like, we actually was making jokes about, "Oh, you got caught slipping by officer this and officer that." Sure. Like we were 19, 20 years old, 18, et cetera, et cetera. And we would say stuff like, "We didn't do anything. No, we don't want to, we're not consenting to go with you." And like, we were taught all of these things. We had the talk, and I'll explain that in a minute too. But what happened is that over that summer, there was so much resentment that was built up, because you'd have a kid that was coming out of Harlem School of the Arts with his trumpet in his hand, and he'd get wrapped up with the same kind of kid that was just chilling and hanging. And so now you have a whole community that was just constantly pissed off with these cops.
Wow, that's insane.
And then we became adults, and then we had kids, and now our kids are going back and forth in the world, and some of our kids are going to Columbia and this and that. Like, it's regular, normal human life. Right. But we had to move out of the community in order to get some sense of peace and quiet. What makes us angry, and when I say us, the people that I talk to, I don't profess to talk for an entire anything, and this doesn't reflect my business or my company or anything like that. This is me talking, right?
Yep.
What makes us angry sometimes is that even in escaping that scenario, we would walk into new scenarios where every time the lights and flashers go on behind our car, it basically feels like a life or death scenario, no matter what it is. And it's constant, it's never ending. You're constantly living in this sense of tension that could turn into something at any time. And the question is always, when do I reserve my right to? Right? When do I reserve my right to say, "No, I don't do this. No, this is not right. Don't put your hands on my daughter. Don't put your hands on my son. Don't put your hands on my wife." When do I reserve my right as a human being to defend my family? And then if I don't do that and something happens, what are the repercussions? What, where's the accountability? And up until now, less than 1% of any police force in the United States, less than 1%, has had any kind of real accountability for anything that they've done.
I'm going to share a story with you that I've never shared publicly. And I only thought about it this morning. I was praying for wisdom and for things I should speak on today with you. And I'm going to go deep. And so years ago, probably when I was 18, my ex-husband and I were out. And at that time, I have 2 brothers. I'm in the middle. I have an older brother and a younger brother. And we all hung in a big group of people. There was a bunch of us. We hung probably 20, 30 of us, always together for years on end. Wasn't always doing the right thing, And so my my ex-husband had been in trouble with the police. And so they had developed a name, and so if you were affiliated with them or out with them and it was at the wrong time or you ran across the wrong person, you could end up going to jail. And my ex-husband actually went to jail. He was completely innocent. And we went to trial and everything. They planted drugs on him. And it was a huge ordeal. It marked him for life. And he literally, he was arrested in a bathing suit in shorts. He had no shoes on.
Oh my God.
There was no way I was standing there. And it was devastating at that time. And at that moment, and from that moment on for years, because we were young, for years, it was like a very scarring moment. If you got pulled over, it was like once they ran your plates, it was like, oh, you're so-and-so's sister.
Yep.
Oh, you're so-and-so. Yeah. And it was like that fear. And so with all of this that's going on, and when I was listening to John Gray talk about that fear, it's like, and Joel Osteen said back to him, he's like, that fear that you're talking about, I don't know that fear. When I get pulled over, I'm not afraid I'm going to get hurt. I'm just going to get a ticket or a warning or whatever. And I don't have that. And I don't either, because I'm older now and I do all the right things. But I did have that, and it was a horrible feeling, and people did go to jail innocently, and it's not anything, and I'm not directing this at police at all, so I hope no one's taking that the wrong way. I'm directing this this goes way back, because that was, I'm not 18 years old now, so that was a long time ago.
None of us are.
Yeah, right. It's like this stuff has been going on for years, and it can't be okay, and I'm not dismantling the police at all, because I don't want to live in the purge. I don't want my daughter to be raped, and I don't want my kids to be hurt ever, or neither you nor me to be hurt. But like you said, somebody's got to be accountable. These people need to stand up and do the right thing, and somebody's got to be going, hey, what are you doing? Where's the proof of this? What is happening here? Why are these innocent people going to jail or getting hurt or getting killed?
My brother is a police officer. He is, okay. I can't get too specific, right? Because he has a very specific role in the police department that is almost unique. So in New York, in the NYPD, and he and I are often on the opposite sides of this conversation. It makes Thanksgiving very weird. And yes, we can agree to disagree about things and what have you. Politically to action, we both disagree. And then when we do sit down and talk, we find that we're actually agreeing on most things, except for one or two small things. And so my position with him is, well, I don't know why it's such a big deal to ask for accountability. I don't know why, because he says there's over X amount of 38,000 or 60,000 cops in New York, and only about 200 of them or 250 are quote unquote bad cops, and all the other cops know it. And I said, well, that's odd, man, because if you know who they are, and you know that they're bad, what they're doing is making your job harder. Because every time they stop someone and they break down their rights, and they don't follow procedure, and they do things that are out of order, and they do things that make them seem like a gang, I said all that does is lump you all together, because then in the aftermath, that gentleman that got pushed to the ground up in Buffalo, New York, and was bleeding from his ears and all this, in the aftermath, you all stand together even when you're wrong. And I was like, and you can see they're wrong, and I could see they're wrong, but then they'll be like, oh, but you should think this. This is how you should perceive what happened. And I said, we're humans. Everyone is human. Yeah. I have the right to not die. I got a right to say, hey, I do everything right on a regular basis, on purpose.
Yeah.
Right. And I should, at some point, what Joel Osteen was saying about the fear, it's deeper than that. I have to be perfect to get out of a stop. Right. If the lights and flashes go on and I'm in the car by myself, I'm actually more of a relief feeling than if I'm in the car with my family or if I'm in the car with friends, because I don't know what's in somebody's pocket. I don't know if they got a joint in their pocket. I don't know.
True.
right? I didn't
Yeah.
stop them and question them before they got in my car. So
Right.
those lights and flashes go on, and I'm like, "Are you okay? Do you have warrants?" Like, I'm asking everybody in my car, right? And when somebody asks you a question in America, you have the right to remain silent, right?
Yep.
I've got to be perfect. I've got to know every single right that I have perfectly in order to be questioned by the police. And people are like, "Oh, you should just comply. You should do this." That's not my job. My job is
No.
not to comply with the cops.
No.
That's their job.
Right.
And so in a universe where they can get fired for coming in late every day. If they came in late every day, they can get fired, right? But they can't get fired for lying on a report. They can't get fired for the camera showing one thing and the report showing another thing. What the hell? What kind of topsy-turvy world is this?
There's a problem there.
So I am for restructuring the police. I am for when they say defunding the police, I'm for the notion that it doesn't need to be military grade police force. Like, we should take that money and we should involve it with mental health, and we should involve it with community policing and things like that. It shouldn't be $100 billion for police force in this country if we can dispute a camera based on the report that the guy gives.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Nothing wrong there. And there has been for a long time. And it just seems to be getting worse, you know? And it's it's ironic, really, because you're speaking about accountability and the lack of accountability that there is. And yet you run one of the tightest accountability groups that there is in our country. For anyone that doesn't know Sekou, he runs this accountability group for real estate agents, and he doesn't care if you're a part of our group or his group or whoever. He just wants to help you be successful. And he's laser focused on being accountable. So it must really irritate you, this lack of accountability.
It drives me crazy.
I bet.
Here's the talk. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, Trisha, but in every Black family and Latin families up here in the Northeast and throughout the South, and even in the West that I know, right? They have the talk with their kids, and traditionally it was have the talk with your young sons. It's how to survive a police interaction. That's the talk.
Not heard that.
Yeah, the talk is how to survive a police interaction, and it has different forms in different areas. But mostly, if you're in the car, you keep your hands on the steering wheel. You tell them when you're moving your hands. You tell them when you're doing this. You turn off the lights. You make sure that the lights on the inside are on because they need to see you at all times. Like, there's some real common sense stuff, and then there's some way over the top stuff, like how you have to interact with them and how you have to respond, and what words you should say and should not say, and how you move and act around them. And it doesn't matter, white cop, black cop, Latin cop. It's how to survive a police interaction. And you get to a point where it's exhausting.
I bet.
It's exhausting. It's the language that I use lately is I have to be the perfect suspect at this point. Like, I can't be having a bad day. I can't have a cold and be coughing or sneezing or itchy or nervous or anything, because anything is, well, why are you looking nervous? What's going on here? Why are you sweating so much? What are you guilty of? And I just think that, be they patriot or be they immigrant or be they anyone that believes in the American experiment, right? And anyone that believes in the patriotism of the Constitution should look at it and be like, hey, whoa, that's wrong. Hey, you're probably not supposed to do that to a citizen of the United States. You're probably not supposed to do that to a human being.
Right.
And I don't feel like everyone is on the same page with that. And so when we start seeing the Black Lives Matter and we start seeing this, and the pushback from quote unquote the other side is, well, you shouldn't feel that way because that's ridiculous. And I'm like, please stop telling me how I should feel, and please stop telling me about my experience because it's different than yours. And when it overlaps, and when that young kid gets hurt by the cops or gets pulled out of the car or whatever, and that kid is trying to exercise his rights, the reaction isn't the same. And that's where everything is breaking down, there's a lot of anger.
There, you're in New York, and I'm here in Houston, and so we watch the news, of course, because you can't help it. It's all over everywhere when coronavirus came, and so for you living there, where a lot of the rioting was going on, it was like the mother lode of it all. I mean, how did that affect your day-to-day life? How did that affect your mentality, your kids, your family? What was that like? What is that like?
I'm gonna be 100% transparent with you. It made me angry. It made me angry, right? And so here's the anger. I was out there. I get to see how it goes, right? And there'll be a lot of folks who are like, but I saw it on television. I saw it in person. And what I saw was aggression from the police and the reaction from the group, right? The rioting, there's only so far you could push people. There's only so many tear gas canisters you could shoot. There's only so many cop cars you could push people with, or horses that you could push people with before their back is up against the wall and they have to react, right? And so we're dealing with young, energetic, angry people, right? Young, energetic, angry people who are frustrated. At some point, if you are a pro, if you're a police officer, FBI, law enforcement agent, governor, mayor, at some point, if you're a professional with having to deal with people, at some point you have to step up and do your job. And if your job is to make sure that everyone is safe, it is not shooting rubber bullets into the crowd. It's not throwing tear gas canister into a crowd where there's actually people there with their kids because of how they feel. So 100% transparency. My wife and my daughter were coming back from Brooklyn the other day, and there was a curfew. Well, they started early enough to get out of Brooklyn before the curfew. And because of the streets being closed off and all of these things, they made it to the bridge to try to get back to Jersey right as the curfew. Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned the purge.
Yeah.
So they shut the borough down, and she was trying to ask a police officer, her and my daughter. My sons weren't in the car. We were not in the car. We were someplace else altogether. And the cop walks over to them with his hand on his gun, because she was asking for directions on how to go around this thing. And he was so tight, like so tense, that he was talking to her as if she was aggressively like doing or saying that we got Jersey plates on the car trying to get back to Jersey, get out of Brooklyn, get out of New York. And the feeling of helplessness that you get around that, it's like when I mentioned, what do you do when someone threatens your family? What do you do when it's your wife, when it's your daughter? What do you do? And so if I'm going to go sexist for a second, as a man, what do I do? I sit back. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You should have just listened.
That's not cool. You're angry, right? It's like, you mess with my family.
Yeah.
It's on.
So people talk about the folks burning stuff down and things like that. And I have my own opinion about that. I'm not going to get into the speculation about who I think is burning stuff down. And it's just property.
Right.
It's insured. It can be rebuilt. It will be rebuilt. You'll probably come back better. Right? Yeah. Right. I mean, listen, everyone involved is going to work to make sure it's better. Right. Everyone involved. Right. When people are harping on that, instead of saying, hey, you know what? They probably shouldn't have killed that kid. Hey, they probably shouldn't have killed that dude. Hey, they probably shouldn't have killed that woman. Right. Like that becomes the breaking point. It's like, wait, hold on, dude, I get it. Like, you don't want your property burnt. But shouldn't you like look at why the properties are burning? Shouldn't you look at why people are so damn angry that they would burn down these properties? And so I'm going to give them a little anecdote that is a common saying in my community, is that the child that is neglected by the village will burn it down just to feel its warmth. And that right there,
It's pretty deep.
yeah. And it doesn't matter the color of the child, by the way.
No.
Because I know in Arkansas, I know in different places around the world, in different wards in Texas, poor folks is poor folks no matter what. And the police treat poor folks differently than they treat rich folks. That's why I'm black, I'm rich, and I'm spoiled.
Okay, so when you look at, like, I can't even imagine. Okay, we talked when you were in Corona and you guys were in lockdown, and New York was under siege from this sickness that no one knew about, and all of a sudden that came out of the blue, and we're just starting to get out of that, or we didn't have it near like y'all did, but you're just starting to get out of that and kind of get some bit of normalcy back. And here comes this other, like, boom, something out of the blue. It's like, where do you go from here? How do you guys recover? How do we bring everybody back? Not back to the way it was, but how can we get people to care about each other and to care and respect each other and be kind? How do we go from here?
I don't know. I know that unfortunately we're used to this, right? And every summer since I can remember, and I'm an old dude, every summer it's something else. And what's weird is that it has to be something crazy to get us away from each other's throats. So the summer of Sam, right? The son of Sam was killing folks this one summer, man. He was going nuts. And everybody in the city, he was killing all kinds of different folks that was just parking and trying to make out, right? And so the city, right? So the city circled the wagons, and it wasn't about white, black, or whatever. The city circled the wagons, and it was all of us against him, right? And 9/11 happens, right? September 11th, 2001. 9/11 happens. You've never seen the city like that before. I've never, ever seen the city like that before. And I know the whole nation sort of embraced, but I've never seen the city like that before, where the construction worker, the cop, the bus driver, everyone was together. Everyone was together. So I'd hate to say this, but the Corona would have to go to another level in order for us to unite again and to just be like, okay, we're all in this together. I think the easiest answer,
and it brought you guys together as much as you could be with all the social distancing, but you were supportive. There in New York and around the world, everyone was supportive. But it seemed to me, it was like the more people got caged up inside their houses, and then there's, like you said, this emotion and this anger, and then all of a sudden something went out of control and the whole world just erupted in violence. It's like all care of humanity left the table.
I will say this is the most diverse I've ever seen this crowd.
I bet
this crowd is diverse, and don't be mad at me. We make fun of the Karens of the world, right? The Karens of the world that need to see a manager and things like that, right? And start yelling. Well, this is the first time we've seen the Karens on our side, and that's huge. That is huge.
I bet.
It's actually uncomfortable to know that all this time we could have been doing this thing together. And there's the Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, right? And the people that argue about that, I don't care. I don't give a shit what you say. Your rights as a human being, your rights as an American should matter more than anything. Whether you agree with me or not,
that's right.
You should be able to look at something and be able to say, hey, that's unconstitutional. That crosses the line. And once we get there, and we can agree on that, whether it's the left, whether it's the right, whether it's pubs or Dems or independent. If you could just look at it and say, hey, that's a ball, that's a strike, that's not right, that's not fair for anyone, then, it's like the Colin Kaepernick thing, right? Mm-hmm. And everyone was up in arms and, he's disrespecting the soldiers. And he kept saying, I'm not. This is about police brutality. I can't stand by. And he kept saying, it's not about that. I respect the military. I expect this and this and that. But people just want like this. No, I want it to be about this so that I can be angry about it.
People
long story
thrive
short,
on drama. They love drama and they stir it up, you know, and the media is like king. That's why I'm glad that we have this social, like we're doing, this is real. It's not scripted. You have no idea what I'm going to ask you, and I have no idea what you're about to say. And you know what? I don't care, because at the end of the day and at the end of this live, you're still my friend, and that's all I
yes,
care
ma'am.
about. And
Yes,
I
ma'am.
still care about your safety and everybody else's in New York and everybody in the world. You know, I believe that we will overcome all this evil. And everyone says I live in La La Land, but it's like, you know what? La La Land's about a lot better than hell. And I
Can
believe
I,
that we're living in hell on earth, you know?
let me, you believe in my safety. Let me tell you something. I know my 20-year-old kid would kill himself to make sure you were safe.
Ah,
I know it. And it's not, Trisha, like, yeah, we're friends and things like that. But if he saw you, you were a stranger in the street and you were in trouble, he would step in the way to make sure you were safe.
my
He
son's
would,
the
he
same way.
would, yeah.
Mhm.
And so if that's the case, right? If that is the case, and yes, there's crime in the world and people do dumb crap all the time.
Yep.
And I'm watching my words and watching my language. I understand, we have a different show. If that's the case, why can't we start there? Why can't we start with, the lawyer in the case with George Floyd says that, oh, well, the bystanders should have stepped in, and that's really why he died, because the bystanders didn't step in. And I can't think of a more irresponsible thing to say, because those four cops, be they new or not, they was going to kill that dude. And if someone stepped in, they weren't going to make it home. They were either going to jail or they might have been on the ground with them. And that's wrong, that we can't step in.
No. Well, it's wrong that even the person, I believe, even the person filming it, like if I would have been there, I would have went to jail 100%. I would have taken a baton to the head, because I would have got involved, because that's wrong. I would never, ever in my life be able to sit there and watch anybody, no matter what they're doing, be killed. And in that mannerism at that, it's like, oh my, it wasn't like it was instantaneous, you know, it was like, wow. And people just watched and filmed. And I'm sure there's footage that none of us have ever seen, because there was probably everybody with their phone out filming it, instead of really, let's see if this man is okay. And maybe I'm going to go to jail, but you know what? I'm going to help save somebody's life. And nobody did.
That is the cornerstone of what these protests are about.
Yep.
Because you feel like you would go to jail.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like I wouldn't have made it home at all. And I've got 5 that I've got to take care of. I got a lot of responsibility. And so now you're forced. It's not like, I'm going to go and do something and this and that. And you're forced to make a decision in that instant between his life and your family and your life and things like that. And so I'm very proud and very frightened of the fact that all of my kids would have stepped in. All of them. And they risked it all. I don't want it, but at the same time, I get to be proud that I know for a fact they would have.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't want them to. And that's where the pain comes. The pain comes in is that we can't just be Americans. We can't just be like everyone else. We've got to filter it through. Okay, now what's going to happen this way, and how's this going to be perceived, and did I do something 2 years ago that they're going to bring up, because the reason why they killed me is because that one time that I had a joint in my pocket, or I was skateboarding in the park, and I
didn't pay my ticket.
I didn't pay my ticket. Whatever it is, like I unfortunately, and Dave and I talk about this all the time. Dave DeVoe. Finale, we talk about this all the time. It's like, how much of that is a target on my back that I've put there, and how much of it is just good, clean safety? Like, hold up, don't run towards a charging bull. You know what I mean? Like
yes. Okay.
It's not fair, man. We as a country, we went to war over taxing on tea. Right? We went to war over taxation without representation. And at this point, it's like, it's not taxation without representation, man. This is just policing without representation. There's no accountability.
No.
Zero.
No. And when there's no accountability, you fail. It's a failed system, period. In
People go
business,
nuts.
you fail. In life, you fail, period.
People go nuts.
They do.
We are so highly regulated in our industry. If
Mhm.
we live off a decimal point, we are financially responsible for what happens. We have insurance that we pay into for each transaction
Yes.
in order to cover any kind of mistake that you make or somebody else's or whatever, et cetera, et cetera. We pay for their mistakes.
Yep.
Our taxes pay their settlement, and our taxes pay for their defense, and our taxes pay for their union. Like, we pay for whatever decision they make.
Oh, yeah.
It's not fair.
When you were saying that, a saying came to my mind. Michael Reese, who is also a great friend of ours, and he's a strategist. Everything is he's intent with every thought that he has. And two of his favorite sayings that he always says is, "Hope is not a strategy, and for every problem there's a solution." And clearly, we can't just have hope here that we're going to make this place up. We got kids that got to grow up. Our kids are going to have kids. I don't want our kids to live in a battlefield. We got to make things right. And so that our kids can raise their kids and they can have the same kind of hope that we have for a better future. We're working every day, you and I are, to make sure that our kids have a better future and that they don't struggle, because we don't want them to. But we can only do so much, the two of us. But when we're together, there's strength in numbers. We got to get this world together.
Damn right. I'll say, in addition to what you're saying, yes, and the expectation should not be on us to forgive them.
No.
The expectation should not be on us to reset the clock every time.
No.
The expectation should not be on us to be like, oh, well, the job is hard and this and that. Dude, at some point, people have to take responsibility for what they do. And that's what they keep expecting us to do. Your husband, when he was younger, somebody did something to him. And years later, and I don't know if this is how you feel. I don't know if this is how he feels when your kids are in law enforcement interactions. If something goes wrong, whether it's natural or manufactured, I'm sure, being a thinking, breathing adult human, I'm sure he's like, well, they might have planted that thing on him. And that's a reality for him.
Yes.
That is one of his options as what the heck is going on. And I think that every single time.
I can't even imagine.
So this is my 19-year-old story. Right? I'm 19 years old. No, I'm sorry. 18 years old. My brothers and I were going to the movies in the Bronx. So we lived in Harlem, right? And we were going to the movies. One of us lived in the Bronx, and we were going to the movies. The Whitestone Cinema was like this huge, like, shining movie that everybody went there. There was going to be girls there. So we were all dressed up. Everybody looked nice. It was, like it was like an event.
Oh, yeah.
And we didn't have cars. In New York, a lot of us don't have cars. Like, we didn't have cars at all, growing up. And so instead of taking the subway, which was going to take us about maybe an hour to get there, we were just going to take a cab straight across, take us 15 minutes, and then we can hang out. And so we pooled our money together to take a cab.
Yep.
Well, about 3 minutes away from the front door of the cinema, cops come from everywhere. Unmarked cars come from everywhere and surround this cab. And we're looking at the cab driver like, dude, what the hell did you do? Right? We were just excited about going to the movies. You just left our house to go to the movies. They pull us all out. Now, mind you, we're all dressed, and it's, once again, we're going to meet some girls, and it's
right?
February. It's snow. It's slush in the street. They threw us in the street, knees in our back, guns to our heads. Didn't tell us a word. It was probably one of the most terrifying experiences of my life.
Wow.
And they're standing. They're not dressed like police. All they are is they have the little badge hanging from a chain on their neck. And they're not even talking to each other. We can't even hear what they're saying to each other. They got a little thing in their ear. And maybe 7 minutes later, 10 minutes later, They get off of our necks, they get off of our backs, they get off, like they get off of us and disappear.
Holy crap.
And we're left there. And the cab driver was like, what the hell is going on? And we were like, I don't know. We thought it was you.
Wow.
And the cab driver was like, what? And so that night we had to just turn around and go home. And we didn't have enough money to go back to the house, right? We just turned around and went home. And it was like, it was an exciting night. We were going to have a good time. And our life was on the line. And no one explained anything to us. No one felt like they owed us an apology. No one said anything to us. And that happened after that. That happened a lot. But that's my experience. And so now anytime someone stops me, I'm expecting that.
I bet.
So my first reaction is, I got to let you know that I understand that I'm not a young person, and I do understand what my rights are. I do understand that this is Annette. And my brother, the police officer, says that that's wrong, that I shouldn't do that. That the reality is you just do what he says and you'll probably make it out.
Probably.
And that's where I'm at in this world. I can either have rights or I can be alive. Like one of the two. I can't have both at the same time.
And that's wrong.
Yeah.
That's wrong. That's a failed system, you know? And it's like, what can we do to change things? And for you in the position that you're in, you know, you run a huge organization there and you are all about giving and helping. So because of all of this diversity that's going on in our world and all that, this horrible stuff that you've had to go through, not even just in your lifetime, but just in 2020, how is that affecting your mindset and you moving forward, still helping and being that servant that you've been? Where do you go? How do you do it?
Having the responsibility of being the person, the mindset person for so many people, helped the mindset. I'm going to quote James Baldwin, famous American author, that says, to be a black man in America and to be even remotely conscious is to be in a state of anger almost all the time. Okay. And so where is my mindset? My mindset, luckily, I do exercises and practice the skill of mindfulness. Luckily, I do exercises and practice the skill of mindfulness, and I put things through my filter, because I've been in a rage the last few weeks.
I bet.
And it is these conversations. It's the conversations with my kids that want to go out and protest. It's that conversation with them that says, these are the kids that would step in, and I don't want them to. I want them to come home. Right. And so that conversation it keeps my mind, it keeps me solid and centered. My son, my 20-year-old, says, Dad, if I wait until the cuffs are on me to talk up, to speak up, then it's too late. And that's my reality right now. And so I've literally been in a state of meditation almost continuously in order to maintain a sense of like, okay, balance and what have you. And last night, the accountability call, it was like, all right, guys, we're back. Let's get back to work. Let's change this. I've donated tens of thousands of dollars to the defense fund of the people who are out there protesting. I'm in a position now where economically I can make a difference, where politically I can make a difference. And my voice, I think, makes a difference. So
it does. And so, Sekou, with that being said, because of your position, you're in a leadership position, people listen to you, you have to lead by example. So yes, I'm sure inside you're, like you just said, you have anger and you've had rages and you know, but for you to be able to control that so that you're not reacting to the way your emotions are inside, because if you go fly off the handle and react, it's not going to solve anything. You're going to suffer for it. Your family's going to suffer. And then all the people that are following you because you're leading them will be like, hey, what happened to Sekou? And then they're lost. So it's like you as a leader and an influencer, what do you say to people out there that are lost right now and are struggling with anger and confusion? And what can you say to help them?
I say a fire in your own house is no good to anyone.
Ooh,
And
I love
you're sitting right there raging and raging and raging, and it's burning from the inside. And if you can't turn that heat into energy, if you can't turn that into propulsion, then it's just going to burn you down. And so what I've been saying for the last few weeks is what is the result you're looking for? Right. I'm using my scripting tactics and things like that. And I'm asking this silly, stupid question that no one is asking. What do you want? And how are you going to get it? You know, this is the time for young folks to go out in the street and to make themselves heard. They don't have any other resource but time.
No.
Right.
No.
I have lots of resources, and the people that I work with have lots of resources. So what I talk to them about is, how do we effectively get what we want? We work our ass off for it. We don't stop. And the chant has been, we let nothing stop us.
I love that.
We let nothing stop us. And the big quotes around the word nothing, as a leader, I can't be like, let nothing stop you. But if you really get angry over some shit, you got to, excuse my language, you got to go out in the street and protest. Like let nothing stop you. And I am obsessed with the growth and development of agents. I'm obsessed with the growth and development of my friends and my colleagues and my clients, so that they can do whatever they want for the rest of their lives with their resources. Excuse my big boy back there. I don't.
Because you know what, and whether you realize it or not, and I think you do, you have a huge responsibility, because it's not just your family that you're taking care of. Yes, you're taking care of them financially, but you're taking care of so many people out there, all ages, all colors, that need help and they need guidance, and they respect you and they admire you and they listen to everything that you say. And so,
and I'm grateful for it. Mm-hmm. And so because I'm grateful for it, you know, don't be mad at me for saying something cliche, right? But with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes.
Right. And so I'm grateful for the fact that what you know what I teach sometimes, that no one out there cares about how you're feeling, right? So if you're calling a FISBO and you're like nervous and this and that, and no one cares about that. Like, they don't care that you're nervous. They don't care. They don't care that you need a commission this week and things like that. So because I spent so much time in that space, right? When this stuff comes up, like, I was like, guess what? No one really cares about how you feel. Like we have to get us to a point where your voice is used in many different ways, on the battlefield and behind the scenes. All the soldiers are important.
They are. Amen. I love that. Important. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope that this helps, and I'm going to keep repurposing this everywhere, because I know that we're making a difference, you know, and I know that if we continue on, you know, pushing forward, even when things get dark and things get harder, that's when we have to push harder. It's like, you know what, I may not see the light at the end, but I know there's one down there, and I'm going to get there. I'm going to keep moving forward, because there's no other option.
Damn right. There's a saying, there's a quote that I've been saying lately, and forgive me, I don't know who the author of the quote is, but it says that the cemetery is filled with unwritten works of art, unpublished books, and unpublished works of art. And this quarantine, this COVID thing, all of this unrest could be the opportunity for us to create a new renaissance. So a lot can come out of this.
I think so too. And I'm expecting that goodness.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, can you tell everybody how they can find you, whether they want to talk to you about real estate or mindset, or just want to thank you, or just get some words of encouragement? How can they find you?
You can go to SekouPyle.work, SekouPyle.work, WORK. You can look me up, SekouCreme.com. We've got a nice little packet out there. And of course, if you're a real estate agent, you want to sell some more stuff, you come to Commitment to Capping, you put your hand on the stump and you say, I'm down. You can come and play with us there too.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here. I love having these conversations with you. I love that we can have this. I love our friendship.
My sister.
Amazing. It's going to get better. It's going to get better.
Oh, I know. You got to break down to break through, right?
Always. 100%.
There you go.
Have a great day.
Thank
Stay cool.
You too.
Bye, y'all.